The world was changing. Film studios, who in the past made a lot of their money by producing an onslaught of sequels, were now resorting to an even lesser form of absent creativity in the form of remakes, or the preferred term, reboots. I guess a reboot is when you plan on remaking the entire franchise as opposed to a single movie. Either way, many of these films that suffered the nauseating 21st century treatment didn't warrant a remake. Thankfully, the filmmakers didn't choose to remake any of the earlier Bond films, but they were going back to the very first Ian Fleming novel as the source of their next Bond film. Casino Royale, for whatever reason, was the only one of Fleming's novels that Eon Productions didn't secure the rights to from the beginning. This was until 1999 when Eon gained the rights after Sony Pictures Entertainment exchanged them for MGM's rights to the Spider-Man franchise. I'm pretty sure both parties went out in the end. Casino Royale had already been adapted twice before by different studios. The first time was a television movie in 1954, and again as the Woody Allen-Peter Sellers parody in 1967. But if anything, the filmmakers just wanted to make Bond edgier and more serious. Now, if you ask me, Pierce Brosnan did a great job blending all the elements of his predecessors. He didn't really grow into the role over time. The performance we saw in GoldenEye pretty much solidified how he would portray the character for the duration of the 90s. But Timothy Dalton tried giving the character some edge in the late 80s, and while a lot of fans appreciated his variation of 007, I just felt it was pretentious. Even if he was trying to develop the character more along the lines of Fleming's novels, I felt that the films were somewhat separate from the books, especially given that for the latter part of the franchise, they often shared little in common, aside from a few similar plot threads. So with Daniel Craig, they were once again trying to go down the Timothy Dalton route. But this was a reboot, so just because we were getting a more serious Bond didn't necessarily mean we couldn't have some fun. The first time I saw this movie, I thought it was a prequel. After all, Judi Dench reprises the role of M, who we all know from Dr. No wasn't always so. M was played for a number of years by the late Bernard Lee, who was in every Bond film up to and including Moonraker. This was also the first Bond film not to have M's secretary, Miss Moneypenny, and fans still included in the number scheme. To this day, it's still referred to as Bond 21. There are several moments in the film where we're led to believe this is his first mission.
And how the hell could Bond be so stupid? I give him 00 status and he celebrates by shooting up an embassy. Is the man deranged?
But despite all that, it's a reboot, meaning that none of the events before or after this ever happened. Whatever, it is what it is. This is the Eon version of Casino Royale. The film opens and the first thing we notice is that it's in gritty black and white. Is this James Bond or Schindler's List? It also has this very film noir style, like it's a 1940s Humphrey Bogart private detective film. Respectable given that the Bond film started in the 60s. So right off the bat, this is different. This has to be one of the most simple intros to a Bond film I've ever seen. Aside from a really fast blink-of-the-eye fight scene in a bathroom, it's a conversation between Bond and his section chief, who, as he finds out, was selling classified information. Bond shoots the bastard, and then we cut back to the bathroom scene where the guy Bond just tried to drown comes back for one final attack. Bond shoots, and then we get the famous gun barrel sequence. So this scene implies, right here, that this was the incident we see at the beginning of every Bond film. It's a nice touch and kind of gets you excited to see how else they've reinvigorated the franchise. We go into the opening titles, traditional stuff, although it could be a little more sexy. It looks like they were trying to sell Bond as the edgy secret agent, and not so much as the playboy that he's known for. The title song is pretty good too, performed by Chris Cornell, and it actually relates to the plot of the movie. It's not just a bunch of naked women jumping around and shooting Bond out of a pistol or something. The actual movie starts off in Madagascar, where an eccentric crowd watches a mongoose snake fight. An international bomb maker gets wind that Bond is tracking him, and a chase ensues. It leads into a construction site where James makes his way to his target in a bulldozer. But that's not a problem for the escaping terrorist, who can climb up the sides of buildings with the ease of, well, Spider-Man. Hey, they were both distributed by Sony, so I guess everyone had old Spidey on the mind. A fallen canister causes an explosion. The two make their way to the top of the structure as they hop across pieces of scaffolding, and then we reach the fight's climax, which takes place on a narrow crane. The terrorist, who's run out of bullets, throws the gun at James, who, get this, catches it and throws it back, hitting him in the face. The chase goes on for quite a while. Eventually, Bond chases the terrorist in a van and finds him in a vacant motel room where a shootout breaks out. James uses his resourcefulness to take out some of the sentries, and when he finally gets surrounded, it appears that he's going to let the bad guy go. But no, he still ends up shooting him, then shoots some exploding cans, making his getaway where he gets information on his next lead. Keep in mind, this chase sequence lasts about 15 minutes, and after all that, we still don't know what the plot entails. But we finally get Judi Dench as M, playing her as an earlier version, I guess, who's pissed at James' actions. Now get this, Bond starts tracking down his lead, someone named Ellipsis, to the Bahamas. How does he do this? Well, it involves disassembling the terrorist's cell phone, analyzing the SIM card, and breaking into M's apartment. That's ballsy. Through this tense conversation, we find that MI6 is trying to track the funding of a terrorist organization.
Don't ever break into my house again.
Bond goes to the Bahamas, where he sneaks into a security room to analyze some security footage. Logging into M's top-secret account, Bond discovers the identity of his lead, that of Alex Dimitrios, an accomplice of Le Chiffre, a terrorist financier. There's a scene where Bond comes out of the water that is eerily reminiscent of Ursula Andress from Dr. No. No thanks, Daniel Craig. This only works with a female. He goes to Dimitrios' house. Did he just take that guy's drink? What a dick. We meet Dimitrios' hot-as-fuck wife, Solange, who Dimitrios shoos away. Fine with me. Let the newbie secret agent have her, you goofy-looking fuck. Not only that, but the guy actually tries to stay in the game by wagering his car, and loses it all to Bond. That pretty much places James at the bottom of his boy I really hate you list. But you think that's bad? He picks up Dimitrios' wife in her husband's former car, takes her back to his place, and has sex with her. So James is back to being that sly womanizer from the 70s and the 80s. They can't even do it in bed either. They do it by an open front door, on the floor, and fully clothed. I don't know if there was any purpose for switching it up. Maybe to give the scene a little more realism, but so far this new James Bond is a real prick. Next, Bond travels to Miami and kills Dimitrios in a quiet knife fight. Think about this for a moment. James goes to the Bahamas, enters Dimitrios' house uninvited, steals some random guy's drink, takes the host's car, seduces his wife, then kills him. Just write the word prick in big black letters on his forehead. Bond follows Le Chiffre's henchman, Carlos, to Miami International Airport. Carlos, who plans on blowing up an aircraft prototype during its maiden flight, engages in an airway fight with 007 clinging on to the side of an airport tank truck. This is reminiscent of that whole city chase in A View to a Kill. And after Bond stops the tank truck from careening head-on with the plane, the cops still bust his ass. However, he did defuse the bomb, making Carlos's detonator pretty useless. Bond meets with M, where they find that Dimitrios' wife was tortured and killed. As it turns out, with Bond having foiled one of Le Chiffre's terrorist attempts, Le Chiffre plans on regaining his investment with the high-stakes Texas Hold'em tournament at the Casino Royale in Montenegro. M enters Bond into the tournament with the hopes that if Bond wins, Le Chiffre will seek the aid of the British government for their protection against his creditors. At this point, I have to stop myself. This just doesn't sound like a Bond movie. Sure, the card playing does, but come on, investors, stock options? Let's face it, Bond fans want action, and this film so far has had some decent chase sequences, but in terms of the plot, it's just not that enticing so far. Keep in mind, we're more than an hour into the movie. So on the train, Bond meets Treasury Agent Vesper Lind, who is looking after Bond's buy-in. As you'd expect, they exchange a little innocent sexual lingo.
So as charming as you are, Mr. Bond, I will be keeping my eye on our government's money and off your perfectly formed house.
You noticed.
It's not as obvious as, hello, James, you have a giant big cock. Please stuff me with it. But he flat out admits that he'd rather sleep with married women. Do you win a prize for being a homewrecker? So they start the big card game and... I'm sorry, but is this the plot? I mean, it's common to see Bond at a card table. Hell, Sean Connery made his first entrance as the character way back in 1962. But that's all it is, a way of defining the character. But this plays a big part of the movie. An interesting note here is the drink Bond orders.
Dry martini.
Oui, monsieur.
Wait. 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quina lily, shake it over rice, and then add a thin slice of lemon peel.
Yes, sir.
You know, I'll have one of those.
Is this the beginning of his trademark vodka martini? If you notice, everyone at the table orders the same thing. It's interesting how they suddenly take to him.
That's it? Anyone want to play poker now?
Of course, bad guy Le Chiffre objects. He's not cool like the in crowd. Oh, great, we have this bad guy terrorist who suffers from a mild case of asthma. Wimp. So after they take a break, Bond plants a bug in Le Chiffre's inhaler. Ah, so it's nothing more than a cheap plot device. Got it. Le Chiffre gets a visit from some old investor buddies, and while Bond tries to listen in, gets attacked by one of them. Vesper Lind gets all freaked out and goes to take a shower with her clothes on. We get back to the oh-so-intriguing card game, and you know what? I'll be honest, I don't play cards, so if you thought this was boring for the avid card player, imagine how painful this is for someone who doesn't play cards. I want lasers in space, damn it! After a particularly suspenseful scene of Bond and Le Chiffre staring dreamily into each other's scarlet eyes, Bond calls Le Chiffre's bluff, and loses his ass. Bond starts to cry when he runs into, hey, it's our old friend Felix Leiter, played by African-American actor Jeffrey Wright. Okay, I know this is going to make me sound incredibly racist, and I don't have a problem with him being black. But Felix was always played by a white actor, so this makes for a big leap in continuity. I'll go with it, hell. After all, this is a reboot. But I just think if you're going to go this route, how about, I don't know, using the same actor in all future films? It might interest some to know that Felix was actually played by an African-American before, in the non-Ian film Never Say Never Again, where he was played by Bernie Casey. The logic behind it was the studio felt that Felix was always a forgettable character, so maybe the audiences would remember him better if played by a black actor. That's some pretty sound logic when you think about it. So anyway, Felix offers to stake Bond, allowing him to continue playing as long as he allows the CIA to turn in Le Chiffre when it's all over with. Le Chiffre, realizing what a resilient fellow Bond is, poisons his drink. You know, in all the Bond films, I'm surprised they haven't attempted this all that often. Maybe because it's, I don't know, predictable? Bond actually realizes this too late and stumbles out into open traffic as he's about to die. He contacts MI6, who guides him through the administration of the antidote, but he doesn't hook up the electromagnetic charger in time and passes out. Luckily, Vesper comes up to save the day, resuscitating Bond and once again putting him back in play. You ever see the show Burn Notice? Michael Weston flat out tells us to induce throwing up if this ever happens. Simple, easy. James Bond, star of 21 movies, just got his 00 ass handed to him by a character from primetime television. As you'd expect, after some more staring and some really intense, high-octane card playing, Bond wins the match. Bond goes to have dinner with Vesper when she suddenly leaves, with Bond chasing after her. Nearly running her over, his car flips over like 9,000 times, where Bond is finally abducted by Le Chiffre's men. The next thing we know, Bond is strapped naked to a chair where Le Chiffre beats him to death in order to get Bond to return the winnings to him. So what we've learned here is that Le Chiffre is a little bitch and a poor winner. He also throws some pretty sissy punches. I'm sorry, slaps. A man comes in, kills Le Chiffre, and the next thing we know, Bond wakes up in a hospital bed. He has Mathis arrested because he was outed as a backstabbing asswipe. He ends up professing his love to Vesper, sending in his resignation to MI6 when he realizes that someone is withdrawing the winnings from the Swiss bank account. Oh, so we still have some more movie left. As it turns out, Vesper has stolen the money and plans on handing it over to the organization she was working for. Bond tries to save her as the building crumbles, but in a fit of guilt, she allows herself to drown. How melodramatic. Let's face it, some of these Bond girls have done some pretty despicable things, and in the end, they still wind up in Bond's bed. Not this one. Well, we find out she wasn't all bad, despite what Bond thinks of her.
Job's done. The bitch is dead.
No, she made a deal to spare Bond's life in exchange for the money.
I'm sure she hoped they would let her live.
Well, if she was hoping they'd let her live, why did she drown herself? Bond tracks down the man who arranged for the theft of the money and in the film's final shot delivers his memorable one-liner.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
Not bad. Okay, I haven't seen this one since it first came out, so I'm actually surprised I had so much to say about it. Here's what I liked about it. It actually is a return to form. Look back at the original Dr. No. There were very little action scenes, no gadgets, no missile-launching Aston Martins. Although this one's pretty long in comparison, it actually moves at roughly the same pace. It definitely gives the audience its money's worth. Just when we thought the caper was over, they were still able to squeeze out a little more story, and it actually leads into the next movie. Yes, Quantum of Solace, the most current Bond film, is a direct sequel that continues the story. Let's talk about Daniel Craig. He actually brings something new to the character. Unlike Pierce Brosnan, who felt like he was trying to encompass all prior performances, Craig does feel fresh to the role. He's edgy and cynical, but there's also a reckless ego that all his acquaintances seem to point out. Now the bad. And honestly, I don't have too many negatives to say about it, but we need to balance it out. Because it's officially a reboot, we don't need to start off with a ton of gadgets or slick vehicles. But let's look at the overall story. It's about Bond trying to win a card game. At its most basic premise, that's what it is. There are some really tense moments, but it definitely underplays the Bond of the 70s and 80s. And I know it really is a matter of preference. A lot of fans like it better when he's more practical, able to get out of a situation because of his resourcefulness, and not because of a floating car or a watch that shoots darts. But let me refer back to GoldenEye. It blended both elements fairly well. And I know the Brosnan films are notorious for their digital effects and over-the-top action scenes. I'm not saying Casino Royale should have gone that route, or even that GoldenEye set some sort of standard. Parts of GoldenEye were pretty silly. But it would have been nice if the filmmakers could have at least acknowledged that there are fans who miss Q Branch. And no, we don't get a Q either. My biggest complaint is because it's such a practical Bond film, there are no moments that truly stand out to me. None of the Bond films are all that memorable as a whole. It's those little quirky scenes that I remember. I don't remember the plot of Thunderball, but I do remember all those underwater sequences, Bond getting his spine stretched apart, and having underwater sex. The big story here is, well, need I say it again? Cards. I swear, when they're actually playing at the Casino Royale, it's no more or no less suspenseful than watching a championship poker game on TV. The stuff that happens around the card game, like James getting poisoned and killing one of Le Chiffre's assassins, is where it's at. Now that aside, I have to give it the benefit of the doubt. It's a return to form. It feels more like a classic Bond film than we've gotten in a long time, but as the series keeps going, I'd like to see them add in some gadgets, man. Bond. It's about cars, gadgets, and women. Up the stakes, Ian.